In the spring of 1962, a steelworker in Gary, Indiana, took his 11-year-old son into the alley behind their house and made him practice shaking hands for 45 minutes. Web of the hand to web of the hand, eyes locked, one firm pump. The boy cried twice. The father did not stop until the grip was right. 40 years later, that boy was vice president of a regional bank in Indianapolis. He told his own son the night before his first job interview that everything he had ever earned started in that alley. The handshake is number 23 on this list. The father who taught it would be called abusive by half the parenting blogs in America today. They were not teaching charm, they were building men. Every gesture had a reason. Every rule had been tested by a father, a grandfather, and a great-grandfather before it reached the boy. Then the 1970s arrived. We called the whole inheritance repressive, sexist, toxic, old-fashioned. We did not replace those rules with better ones. We replaced them with nothing. A generation of boys was raised with no code at all and told to find themselves. Most never did. Loneliness rates among American men have tripled in 50 years. That is not a coincidence. That is a receipt. Number 22 took less than 4 seconds and decided whether a boy got hired or got passed over for the rest of his life. Number 11 was so consistently enforced in American homes before 1970 that breaking it was a moral failure, and it is now the single behavior most absent from modern men under 40. And number 2, the rule fathers drilled into sons with more discipline than any other, has been quietly removed from every parenting book printed since 1985. These 25 rules were not about being smooth, they were about being raised. They were the inheritance every American father once owed his son, paid out in small lessons across 10,000 ordinary days. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 25 forbidden charm rules American fathers taught their sons before 1970. Number 25, take off your hat indoors. Before you crossed the threshold of any building, a home, a church, a store, a courthouse, the hat came off. Right hand to the brim, hat into the left hand. It stayed off until you were back outside. For a farm boy in 1955 Iowa, walking into the bank with his father, the rule about taking your hat off was the first lesson of public life. His father did not announce it. He simply removed his own hat at the door. The boy watched. The boy learned. American men of 2 generations practiced this so consistently that a man who forgot was assumed to be drunk. The hat said it before the man did. Number 24, stand up when she enters the room. Wife, sister, stranger, teacher, waitress. When a woman walked into the room, you stood. The chair came back. You stayed standing until she was seated or had passed. For a 13-year-old in 1958, Cincinnati, at his aunt's funeral, standing for every woman who entered the parlor was the lesson his father drilled into him on the drive over. Not chivalry, a refusal to let a woman feel invisible in a room full of men. The whole Midwest ran on this rule for 40 years. We called it sexist and threw it out. We did not replace it with anything kinder. Number 23, the handshake. Web of the hand to web of the hand. 1 firm pump, 2 at most. Eyes locked the whole time. 3 seconds. A weak grip meant you were sick or hiding something. For an 11-year-old in 1962 in Gary, Indiana, the handshake was practiced in the alley until it was right. The father did not believe a son could enter the world of men without it. By 1955, hiring foremen across the steel belt could rate a man's character in 3 seconds of contact. The handshake closed the door on a job before the resume was ever opened. Number 22. Look the man in the eye. When another man spoke to you, your eyes came up. You held the look until he was finished, not at his forehead, not at his shoulder, but at his eyes. For a 17-year-old walking into his first interview at a Cleveland tool shop in 1964, the eye contact was the interview. The foreman had decided before the boy sat down. American fathers drilled this rule into sons from age 6. A boy who could not hold a man's eye was a boy not yet finished. The interview was 4 seconds long. The boy did not know that. Number 21. Yes, sir. No, sir. Until a man told you otherwise, he was sir. Age did not matter. Class did not matter. Color did not matter. The default was respect, given before it was earned. For a delivery boy in 1957 Memphis, dropping ice at a back door, the sir was a habit drilled by a mother who had told him at 5 that the word cost nothing and the missing of it cost everything. Every American father of that era enforced the same rule. We called it servile. The men who lived it called it being raised right. Number 20. The coat off the shoulders first. When you walked into another man's office, you waited to be offered the chair. When you were offered it, you took your coat off before you sat. The coat went over the back of the chair. Never the floor, never a second chair. For a junior salesman in 1959 Boston meeting his first real client, the coat-off move was 3 seconds of silent competence before a word was spoken. The client read it without knowing he was reading it. Most of being raised right was about what was decided before anyone spoke. Number 19. Walk on the outside of the sidewalk. When you walked with a woman, you took the side closer to the street. Always. If you crossed the road, you switched sides. The rule came from a century earlier, when horses splashed mud onto pedestrians. The horses were long gone. The rule survived. For a boy in 1961, walking his mother home from the grocery, switching sides at every corner was a ritual his father had taught him at age 7. The street was no longer dangerous. The lesson was never about the street. It was about who paid attention to whom. Number 18. Open the door without announcing it. You got there first. You opened it. You stood half a step out of the way. You did not say after you. You did not gesture. The door was simply held. For a Boy Scout in 1956, Kansas City holding a church door for an elderly woman, the unannounced door was the ethic of his troop. The man who narrated his own decency was advertising. The man who held the door without speaking was just decent. There is a difference, and it used to be the difference between a boy and a man. Number 17. Pull out the chair. At any table, the woman to your right had her chair pulled out. You stepped behind her. You eased the chair back. You waited until she was settled before you took your own seat. For a farm boy in 1953, Nebraska, at his first restaurant dinner, the chair pull was watched and corrected by his father across the table without a word spoken. A small head tilt was the entire instruction. American fathers passed this gesture down by demonstration for 150 years. It vanished in about a decade. We did not lose it. We were told to. Here is what nobody says out loud. 1 in 4 American boys is now raised without a father in the home. 1 in 3 American men over 50 reports having no close friends at all. These are not 2 separate problems. They are one problem with 2 timestamps. The boy without a father becomes the man without friends. There is no school for what a father teaches. There is no app for it. There is no replacement curriculum. A father is the man who stands in the alley and corrects the handshake until it is right. A father is the man who tilts his head across the dinner table, and the boy knows what was wrong. When that man is missing, the corrections never come. The boy becomes a man who was never finished being raised. The country fills up with such men. Number 16. Pay for the date. You picked her up. You ordered first if she asked. You paid the bill quietly before she saw it, placing cash on the tray. Not a transaction, a sentence. For a 1959 college sophomore in Madison on his first real date, paying the bill was the lesson his father had given him in the car on the way out. A man who could not pay for the evening should not have asked for it. The rule was never about money. It was about the willingness to be responsible for the night. Number 15. Walk her to her car. When the evening ended, you did not say goodbye at the front door. You walked her to her car. You waited until the engine started. You watched the taillights leave the lot. For a small-town teacher in 1960, Sacramento, walking his date to her Plymouth, the walk was a closing argument. 30 seconds. 40 years of memory. The girls who got walked to the car remembered the walk longer than the dinner. The boys who skipped it never knew what they had failed to do. Number 14. Never speak ill of an absent man. When a third man's name came up at the table, you said something true and good, or you said nothing. There were no exceptions. For a 1957 Chicago insurance broker raising 2 sons, the rule was repeated at every Sunday dinner for 15 years. The boys watched their father hold his tongue about men they knew he disliked. They learned that the words spoken about an absent man were a measure of the present one. Silence kept the table clean. Silence kept the territory clean. Number 13. The silent nod. When another man you respected entered the room, you did not call out his name. You did not wave. You nodded once. He nodded back. The greeting took half a second. For a Pittsburgh foreman in 1956 walking into the mill yard at 6 in the morning, the silent nod between him and the night shift foreman was the entire handover. No words, no paperwork. Mutual recognition between 2 men doing the same job for 20 years. American men could have a full conversation with a chin lift. We forgot the language. Number 12. Keep your voice steady. When the news was bad, when the room was tense, when the other man was loud, your voice stayed level. Not soft, not weak, steady. For a boy in 1962 watching his father get yelled at by a customer in a hardware store, the steady voice was the lesson he carried for the rest of his life. The customer left. The father went back to stocking shelves. Later, in the truck, his father said a man who could not control his own voice could not be trusted to control anything else. 8 words, 40 years of wait. Number 11. Arrive 5 minutes early. Not 10. 10 was rude in its own way. 5. For a young engineer in 1958 walking into his first meeting at General Electric, the 5-minute cushion was the difference between a man who was managed and a man who managed himself. American fathers treated lateness as a moral failure, not a scheduling problem. A boy who arrived late had told a story about his character before he ever opened his mouth. The men who still practice this rule now stand out as if they have a special skill. They do not. They were simply finished being raised. Number 10. The hand on the shoulder. When another man received hard news in your presence, you did not fill the silence. You did not look away. You put your hand on his shoulder once, briefly, and let the silence do the work. For a Bethlehem mill foreman in 1956, telling a worker his brother had been hurt at the second mill, the hand on the shoulder was the whole sentence. Words would have made it smaller. Most men today have forgotten how to do this. Sons learn from fathers how to be present in another man's worst moment. The forgetting is not a small thing. Number 9. The handwritten note. After any meaningful meeting, any dinner, any introduction, you sent a short note within 24 hours. 3 sentences. Handwritten, stamped, mailed. For a Hartford insurance executive in 1958 raising 3 sons, the note was practiced at the kitchen table every Sunday evening. The boys hated it. Every one of them built a 30-year career on the habit. The cost of the stamp was 3 cents. The return was the rest of the life. In 2018, researchers at Harvard Business School studied first-impression trust signals across age groups. They expected younger Americans, raised on modern communication tools, to outperform older generations at building rapport. They found the reverse. Men raised before 1965, the handshake men, the eye contact men, the doorway pause men, were rated as more trustworthy by strangers within 30 seconds than any other group tested. The lead researcher called it the grandfather effect. The conclusion was simple. The rules worked. Not because they were old, because they were correct. The study was buried in a journal nobody reads. The men who knew it instinctively had been dead for 30 years. Number 8. Take the blame when you are in charge. If the project failed, the man in charge took the blame in public. The credit went to the team. The fault went to the boss. For a Detroit plant supervisor in 1959, standing in front of his foreman after a missed quota, the rule was the entire job. He did not name the man who had caused the failure. He took it himself. He fixed it later in private. The men under him would have walked through fire for him. They did, for 20 years. Number 7. The firm no without explanation. When you said no, you said it once. You did not apologize. You did not explain at length. You did not soften it with 7 qualifications. For a small-town pharmacist in Indiana in 1960 refusing to fill a suspicious prescription, the firm no was a single sentence and a steady look. A man who explained his no for 3 minutes had already said yes underneath it. American fathers taught their sons that a man's no was as good as his yes, and that both had to be earned by being used cleanly. Number 6. The goodbye that names the next meeting. You did not just say goodbye, you named the next thing. I will see you Tuesday. Give my regards to Margaret. We will finish this Sunday. For a Pennsylvania funeral director in 1958, the forward reference was the kindest sentence in the language. It told the other man that the relationship continued past the door. Rotary clubs and Knights of Columbus halls, from Erie to Allentown, closed every meeting with the same line. The handshake was punctuation. The sentence was the bond. Number 5. The refusal to brag. When your work was good, you did not announce it. You let other men do it for you. If they did not, the work spoke, or it did not. For a 1961 Cleveland engineer who had just designed a critical part, the refusal to brag was the lesson his father had given him at 9. A man who praised himself did the work twice, once with his hands and once with his mouth, and the second time always cost him. The work was the loudest thing in the room. The man stayed quiet beside it. Number 4. The willingness to walk away from the fight. When another man wanted to fight you, the lesson was not how to win. The lesson was how to walk. You did not back down. You did not apologize. You did not engage. You turned and left, and the other man learned the fight he wanted was not available. For a 15-year-old in 1963, outside a Brooklyn drugstore, being baited by an older boy, walking away was the hardest thing his father had ever asked of him. He did it. He thought about it for the next 60 years. Most of being a man, his father had told him, was knowing what fights were not yours to take. Number 3, the listening pause. When a man asked you a question, you let 2 full seconds pass before you answered. Not for drama, for respect. The pause said you had heard. The pause said the answer was being weighed. For a 1959 Kansas City FBI agent interviewing a witness, the 2-second rule was the interview. Quantico teaches this rule today and credits modern behavioral science. American fathers were teaching it to 9-year-olds at the dinner table 100 years before Quantico existed. Your grandfather called it shutting up. Number 2, honor your word. What you said you would do, you did. Not most of the time. Every time. If you said you would be at the harvest on Saturday, you were there. If you said the loan would be repaid by July, it was repaid by July. For a Texas rancher in 1955, raising 4 sons, this was the only rule that mattered. Everything else was decoration. The handshake was the audible version of the promise. A man whose word was not good was not a man yet. American fathers enforced this rule with more discipline than any other. We replaced it with terms and conditions. Number 1, be where you said you would be. Be there, always show up, on time, to everything: the dinner, the recital, the funeral, the game, the meeting, the promise, every single one. For a 1960 small-town father in Ohio, raising 3 sons on a railroad worker's salary, showing up was the only inheritance he could afford. He never missed a single event in any of his children's lives. He died in 1991. Every one of his 3 sons was at the hospital before the doctor finished the sentence. They had learned the rule. They were keeping it. None of these rules required a charm school. None required a confidence coach, a self-help book, or a subscription to anything. They required a father, a man willing to spend 20 years correcting his son in the small moments nobody else would correct. The hat at the door, the handshake in the alley, the hand on the shoulder, the eye contact at the table. We decided in the 1970s that this kind of training was repressive. We told fathers to be friends instead of teachers. We told boys to find themselves instead of being shaped. We replaced inheritance with self-expression and called it progress. The rules are still on the shelf. They are still correct. The only thing missing is the man who used to stand in the alley and make his son practice until the grip was right.